All right, we're going to get started, folks. Welcome to HED Talks. This is really a fascinating series, so whoever it was that wanted the Gilded Age, thank you.
It was David, I believe.
No, there was a couple of women because there's a drama series on. There were a few women. Yeah, I know it was women. I just can't remember who. Because Kings and Queens was like months and months ago. And I had just started that when they said, hey, how about the Gilded Age? So there you go. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the Gilded Age. And today, what I'm going to share with you is the big time guys. All right? The big guys. And we've got two of the greatest, most influential moguls who collide. So today we're going to talk about the two that crash into one another and how it all falls out. We'll see how that falls out, how it shakes out. But before we do that, we have to do what? We're going to do a fast review. Yeah, we're going to do a fast review because it's a brand new series, and so I just want to remind you of what we talked about last week because it's pretty interesting stuff, right? So we talked about how the Gilded Age is preceded by something devastating.
Civil War.
Excellent, yes. It's predated immediately. What?
A civil war, is that?
Yes, by the Civil War. And war is always devastating, but what is so infinitely more devastating about a civil war?
Families against families.
Exactly. And how old is the United States? About 100 years old when this is going on, okay? And not only do we have brother against brother, but what is happening to our new country? Remember, and last week I had several photos to show you. I took some of them out because it's our review. But this is Virginia. That's Virginia. This photograph is taken after the Civil War in the state of Virginia. And so because this has happened, it isn't just people in the United States that are feeling like this experiment in democracy has failed. Who's thinking that it has failed?
Western England.
The entire world, the whole world is looking on us and thinking that it has failed. But did it?
No.
It didn't. And there was something that was in the works already that was going to revive us. Do you remember what that was?
Railroad.
Excellent. Yes. They were wanting to do a transcontinental railway. But there was problems with it. It was always talked about but never pursued, and there was just a little obstacle to getting that completed, remember?
Yeah.
You'd have to blow it up, right? You have to use explosives to do that. And it was during the Civil War that President Lincoln realized how valuable it would have been had it been there, and thought that it was something worth the trouble, worth the risk, worth the money to pursue. And so he hires two contractors, remember?
Yeah.
Union Pacific and Central Pacific, and he does that for a very specific reason. Do you remember why?
Keep the graft corruption.
Competition and to, I think so, I heard somebody say it.
Keep the graft and corruption at ease.
Yeah, that's true too. But he wants to get it done, right?
Yeah.
And if you just gave it to one contractor, would they kind of milk it?
Yeah.
Drag their feet a little bit? Yeah, they probably would do that. So he was smart enough to know, yeah, that if I do this and give incentives, and the incentives the incentive was land. And what does land mean? Everything. Land means wealth, yes. So the incentive was land. And so we did. We had the Transcontinental Railroad, and look how long it took. It started in 63 and it was finished in 69. They didn't exactly, they were supposed to meet here, but they met here. So one side was doing a little better than the other. But the ultimate goal had been accomplished, right? So once that connection was made and we were able to get from coast to coast, well, what happened? What happened here in the United States? What happened to the economy? What happened to...
It exploded.
It absolutely exploded because now we've got industries that are in higher demand. Remember we talked last week about coal?
Yeah.
The demand for coal triples. All right, it triples right away. And then we've got some new industry. One of the new industries that we experienced was what?
Oil.
Steel, exactly. And now you could get instead of just selling locally, you could sell all over the place, right? You could sell all over the place. Now you could always have done that, except it would take months and months longer. All right, so really it just cuts the time down significantly. All right, so now trade has just skyrocketed because of this one thing. The other thing that came from that was they want to get their products across the country, and they've got to do something if they want to send things that need to be refrigerated, right? And so it's here that we have the invention of the refrigerated boxcar. And then last week we talked about that opened up the meat packing industry. So one thing leads to another thing leads to another thing. As a matter of fact, there were so many jobs created just because of this Transrail that there were 180,000 new jobs created simply because of that, as a result of that. Not bad, right?
Not bad.
All right, and is that just exactly what the country needed?
Yes.
Yeah, it's exactly what we needed. So now we're becoming a powerhouse, right? A force, aren't we? Yeah, we're creating things, inventing things, producing things, getting things out around the world. Now, it was so successful that everybody wanted in on that, didn't they? Look at this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right, so this is just about 20 or so years later, and look how many railroads are being built. Because merchants want to get their stuff to different places, correct? All right, so there's so much money being made, and if you owned, take a look at this, yeah? If you own 40% of that, 40%, 40%, how do you think you're doing? Yeah, that's pretty good. 40% of the railways. And who was it that we talked about last week that owned 40% of the railways? Cornelius Vanderbilt, that's exactly right. But he doesn't start out that way, does he? No, he's in shipping. He's been sending things everywhere, actually. And he starts out very humbly. So he's a rags to riches story. And he just buys, with a loan from his mother, he buys a flatbed ferry boat. And he turns that into a huge shipping empire. Then he starts buying steamboats, and he's got himself a fleet. And he is so successful, he becomes so synonymous with shipping that they start calling him what?
Commodore.
Yeah, he's the Commodore, okay? So now he is he's like the king of shipping. So he's on top of the world, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a tycoon in shipping. So he should be happy. That's the end of his story, correct?
No.
No, of course not. That's not the end of his story, because he's also a what?
Risk.
A high stakes roller, because he's doing really well in shipping, but he's seeing the advances of the railways, and he wants in on that, doesn't he? So he takes the huge, huge profits that he's got from shipping, he gambles the whole thing away, and he wants to go into what?
Railroads.
He invests it all into railroads. And does anybody remember the return on his investment? Remember from last week? The return on his investment was $68 million, which would be 75 billion with a B today. All right, so he did pretty well. And even though he was just a scrappy, regular guy, all right, he doesn't come from money, all right, he came from basically poverty, and he built himself up. He wasn't the type to put on airs, right?
No.
No, he wasn't. There was one woman who would never have him into her home because he spit his tobacco chew on her carpet. He spit out his tobacco chew on her carpet. I don't think I'd be inviting him over much either. I really don't. So that's the kind of guy he was. So he wasn't too into the opulence, right? But what about his kids and grandkids? What about them?
They were.
Oh yeah, they were. So we took a look last week. I'm not going to do it again this week, but we looked at the houses, remember?
Yeah.
And we even went inside some of those great mansions, didn't we? I know the women will remember that. So there is like excessive wealth. I mean, it's outrageous. They're filthy, filthy rich. And that prompts some controversy. And why is that? Why would that be so controversial?
Because of the other people who were so poor.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Because of the other people, Pat. All right, so really, in New York, side by side, this is happening side by side. You've got this ultra wealthy, this like nauseatingly wealthy situation, and then you've got devastatingly dirt poor people, and this is housing for them. And not only are they living like this, these are people, they're not, just hanging out, not trying to accomplish anything. They're working, aren't they?
Yes, they were.
And they're working 12 to 16 hours a day, right? Remember? And they're living like that, even though they are working, and they're working. Oh, I just wanted to point this out.
$1 a week.
What?
It says they will be paid $1 a week.
Oh yeah, they get paid very, very little. The men get paid more than the women. They're doing the same stuff. The men get paid more than the women, and the women get paid more than the children. Okay? But I had found this is a ad from a newspaper from Lowell. Something, in Chicopee. So relatively local. All right? And so we've got these people working in these factories, and what are the conditions like?
Very nice.
And they're not getting paid very well, are they? We've established that. And we know that children are working, children as young as 6, 7. They take the littlest ones in the cotton factories because they can go under the machine and scoop up the remnant that has fallen to the floor. Oh, unbelievable. All right, so the working conditions are absolutely horrible. And if you are hurt, what happens to you?
If you're out of work, someone else takes the job.
You're out of work. There's no workers' comp, is there?
No.
Nope, there is no workers' comp. And remember, coal went up, the demand for coal went up, so the demand for coal miners went up, and now we've got children down in the mines as well. All right, doing a similar thing. The smaller they are, the easier it is that they can get into these, smaller places, and so they send the children. It's just terrible. And of course, like we just said, there is no there's no rules, there's no regulations, there are no unions yet at this point, all right, there's nothing. So the employer, the factory owners can do what? Anything they want, absolutely anything they want. And I shared with you last week a quote that I had read from one factory owner that said, I treat my employees like I treat my machines. When they get old and broken, I replace them. And there is no pension, there's nothing for you. If you lose a limb, there's nothing for you. If a family member dies that was providing income, there is nothing to compensate you for the death of your family member. But we did notice last week that there were some rules and regulations in the elite group, right? And they have to do with etiquette. Remember that from last week? Okay, so now in the wealthy sector, we have old money and new money. The old money people hate the new money people. All right? So we've got status from income levels, but then even at the top tier of that, there is even a further breakdown. The old money people will not tolerate the new money people because they're just not good enough. They're not like them. Okay, so old money people look like this. All right, the money's been in the family for a long time, and you can tell because they've got all these expensive heirlooms. They're not very showy because they really don't need to be, right? They don't need to be, and they're usually educated. Now, what about new money? Was Cornelius Vanderbilt educated?
No.
Did he go to an Ivy League school? No, he didn't. He's a first generation, correct? I mean, he's probably richer than some of these people. Well, he is, because he, at some point for a while, he was the richest man in America. So he's richer than them, but he was not as good as them. All right, he was just gruff and vulgar, and they really would not associate with him. So the new money people, I guess it's not too surprising, they felt the need to show their wealth because what did they have to do? Yeah, they had to impress people, and they had to really, do whatever they could because they want to be a part of that elite group. They want that status, okay? And this boils down in the one incident that I think everybody knows about. It's quite famous, and that was the conflict between the Astors and the Vanderbilts. All right. Now it wasn't Cornelius. He doesn't care. He'll come to your ball and apparently spit tobacco on your floor. But so he couldn't care less. He doesn't want to be there. But he's got his grandson, who now we're into the third generation of having the money. So he's grown up what? Wealthy. He's grown up wealthy and spoiled, and this has been his life, and he hasn't known anything else. And so does he want to be in that upper crust? He really does. Does he understand why he isn't? No, and neither does his wife. You remember her, Elva. Yeah, you remember Elva. And she wasn't going to put up with this, okay? So she wasn't going to go quietly. She was going to stomp her feet and scream and have tantrums until she was noticed by the elite. And the elite, she needed to notice her, was this woman, remember? Mrs. Astor, yes. Well, she's old money, and she was really, she was controlling the whole society there in New York at the time. All right, so what she said went. And she had her exclusive club. Do you remember it's called the 400? Because she could only invite 400 people to her parties, because that's all that would fit in her ballroom. 400 people. So if you weren't invited, what were you?
Outside looking in.
Yes, outside. In fact, it was so humiliating that people that were not, that didn't make the list, they would leave the city. They would go away. They would travel rather than have to say I wasn't on the list. They could just say, "Oh well, I was traveling at the time." All right. It was that people. I mean, can you believe that? That kind of blows my mind. But I can't relate to such wealth anyway. So I mean, oh my gosh, it's so crazy. All right, and Alva was especially vulgar, according to Mrs. Astor, because what she did when this is her Manhattan mansion, that's her home, her house where she lived in Manhattan. Poor thing, right? All right, but she not only had it garishly ornate on the inside, she let that spill out into the outside too. She wants everyone to see what she can afford. And doesn't she totally fit the description of new money? She totally fits that description. So she's got these horrible, vulgar, nude statues, and all these things are on the outside of the house. And so she is especially shunned. She is totally shunned by the old money elite because she's just so, she's just so uncouth. Now, she is not going to take that lying down. So nobody's going to come to her parties. Nobody's going to come calling on her. She's not being accepted by high society. So she's going to get everybody back. And she does this pretty well. Do you remember the Vanderbilt ball? Do you remember what she did? Exactly, that's exactly right. And this was a huge thing. Remember what it cost? Yeah.
Obscene.
Yes, obscene, for one night, for one party. So what she does is she invites everybody, all of the other people that make the Astor list, except for Carrie Astor, who is a teenage girl who is just going to die if she does not go to the ball. Well, Elva says the reason why she didn't invite the lovely young lady was because Mrs. Astor had never called on her, never paid her a visit, the way you would any new neighbor. And so she didn't know where she lived, so she didn't know where to send the invitation. So then the next day, the very next day, Mrs. Astor walks across the street and pays a call to Elva Vanderbilt. So Carrie was able to go to her ball, and last week I showed you the costumes. Do you remember that? Yeah, I don't have them this week, but we saw some pretty outrageous costumes that the people had from this ball. Now, she was doing that in society, but Cornelius, he was changing the landscape of Manhattan itself. Do you remember what he did?
Grand Central Station.
Excellent, yes. Yes, he built Grand Central Station. And we had a clip on that last week that talked about all of the details and just how elaborate Grand Central Station, originally it was called Grand Central Depot. And that was Cornelius Vanderbilt that is responsible for that. All right, so that's one hell of an accomplished life, don't you think? So he should be able to just, retire quietly, shouldn't he?
He's a workaholic.
He doesn't want to do that. He does not want to do that. So now this man who has far exceeded the life expectancy of the time, he's in his old age. He's in his early 80s. and he's decided that he can see that the railroads have overextended themselves, because there's quite a few, right? There's an awful lot of them, and they've overextended themselves, and now that's going to be going downhill. He was a visionary, and he could predict trends. And he saw something else that he thought was up and coming that was going to be big, and he wanted in on that. What was that?
Oil.
Excellent, yes. It was oil. Now, at the time, do you know what oil was used for?
Lubrication.
Lubrication, but also it was used for kerosene. Exactly, yes. And so light was a very important thing. We don't have Edison yet. We don't have electric light yet, okay? So there are candles, there are fires. It's very dangerous, right? Kerosene was dangerous too at this time. It was kind of hit or miss, okay? If it wasn't, if it wasn't refined properly, thank you, Bob. It could be unstable. It was unstable. It was unsteady. But he could see that this was the way of the future. And so what he thought to himself, because he wants to control everything, if I get somebody that's really vulnerable, that really needs me, then I can control them, right? So he finds a start-up rig company that's near the railroads that would work for him, and he thinks, okay, I'm gonna toss this guy who's not doing very well. He's just started up, and it's hit or miss. It's a gamble. It might go, it might not. And I'm gonna toss him a lifeline, and then I own him. I own him. That's what Vanderbilt wants, right? That's how he does business. Business is that cutthroat. So he wants to own him. And the guy he finds in this little start-up rig is this guy. All right, so he sets up a meeting with this guy, Rockefeller, all right, thinking that piece of cake, he's going to have him in his back pocket. And all I can say is, yeah, be careful. He is not seeing what's about to hit him. Okay, he is not understanding the force that is about to enter his life. So let's take a little look behind the scenes. How do we even get there? What makes J.D. Rockefeller, J.D. Rockefeller? Well, we know about his parents, okay? This is William Avery Rockefeller, and he marries Eliza Davison, all right? J.D. is John Davison Rockefeller. Okay, so these are his parents. His mother is a devout Christian from the Baptist church, and his father is not. His father, okay, his father is, he is a con man. He's a con man. Do you know what his nickname is? They call him Devil Bill. Devil Bill, yes. And so he is, you know what's really fascinating about this too? So he was selling these elixirs. And he would just travel. He was like a vagabond. He would travel and he would go around and he had these bottles of liquid. Do you know what was one of the ingredients in his cure-alls?
Cure cocaine.
Petroleum.
Oh, God.
Isn't that weird? Isn't that so weird? Because then his son would go on. I mean, is that bizarre? So I just thought that was such a coincidence. I wanted to share that with you. All right, so he's traveling. Now, if he's traveling, going from town to town, selling his cure-alls, what's happening to the family? What about Eliza and the kids? What are they doing? Oh my gosh, when the father's there, when Devil Bill is home, here are a couple of things, just to give you a little more insight into him. Okay? So this man used to tell his son, John, to jump into his arms, and then what?
Oh, he let him fall?
And he let him, yeah, and he let him fall. And he would say, never trust anyone completely, not even me. All right, can you imagine that? Yeah, not even your own father. Don't trust anybody. All right, now because the father is gone, John and his little brother William, they would do things like they would sell confections to the children in the neighborhood. They would make, I just thought it was fudge, because I don't know, I must have a craving for it.
I'll buy
So,
some.
right? Yes, me too. Me too. I would go for that. Doesn't it look great? So they would sell that to the children, you know, at an increased rate, whatever the cost was, then they rose the cost and they would make money that way. But here's something really fascinating. John and his brother also, in addition to selling confections to the children, they would also loan them small amounts of money with interest.
Uh-huh.
And John Rockefeller, as a young kid, had paper and pencil, and he would take copious notes about all of his transactions. All right, so these are very small amounts of money, but he's earning interest. And this is what he is doing to try to support the family. Because where's Devil Bill?
He's out on the road.
He's out on the road, and he's not leaving them with any means. They've got to figure it out themselves. Here's another thing that Devil Bill says. I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make them sharp. So he cheats his own sons. He cheats his own sons. Now, Eliza has an influence on the children as well. Okay, remember, she is a devout Christian, and she's told them that no matter how bad it gets for us, we must always set something aside to give to others. And so that has been instilled in the children. And of course, she was a much larger influence in their lives because she was there. She stayed. She did not take off. As a matter of fact, Devil Bill was such a terrible factor in their lives that as time went by, he was actually found guilty of raping a woman. And once he was found guilty, he had to flee. He had to take off. And the family is left to live with that shame and humiliation. Now, the Rockefeller family continue on, and they're very private, and I can't help but wonder if it didn't come from, you know, this background, this history. You know, you'd want to keep your personal life personal and not have everybody know about it. But we do know that the family, they had to stay where they were. They couldn't afford to go anywhere else and start over again, and so they had to grow up. Can you imagine? They had to grow up. Now, despite this childhood, John and his brother William do open this oil rig because that was the up-and-coming thing at the time, and they opened it in Ohio. And again, as I said before, it's brand new. It could go, it might not go. Oil rigs were a huge gamble, weren't they? You didn't know if you were going to hit or not, right? You didn't know what was under there. You had to drill and find out. So they've got this going on. They're not making a lot of money. They don't know what their future is going to hold. And that is when Vanderbilt enters in. Okay, Vanderbilt is going to take this vulnerable, tiny little company, and then he's going to absolutely, utterly control them. All right, so he invites J.D. Rockefeller out to see him. They're going to have a meeting, all right? And J.D.'s going to go because he needs this. He knows if he's going to make anything, he needs this this partnership, this investment. So he's about to get on the train, but something detains him. And guess what happens with the train? The train derailed, and the passengers, it was a fatal train wreck. And J.D. Rockefeller, this experience changed his whole life. And he felt like he was saved, he was spared, and God had a purpose for him, and that he was supposed to, go on and do things. Now, he got another train, and he did go out, and he did meet with Vanderbilt, okay? And they are supposed to have an exclusive deal. All right, so the deal is that Rockefeller is supposed to fill the trains that Vanderbilt owns, because other cargo, he's losing other cargo. All right, so, but oil is a big thing, so he knows if he could fill his trains with oil, he's going to make it. Now, the problem with this, though, is Rockefeller says, yes, he takes the deal, but he doesn't have anywhere near enough oil to keep his end of the bargain. All right, so he says yes because he needs it, because he's desperate. So now he's got to figure out a way to keep that bargain with Vanderbilt, because he wants to be in partnership with him. And what he's thinking about is, oil is one thing. It's a gamble, but more than that, so much of it's wasted, right? So if you strike, a lot of it spills out. It's just you lose so much of it. And this is when Rockefeller decides that drilling is not for him. That's not a business. That is a roll of the dice. But what is a business? Yeah, if he could find a way to refine it and make it more stable, because remember, it was not that stable. So he hires somebody to look into this, and guess what? He finds a way to stabilize it. Oh, I gotta go wicked fast now. All right, so he finds a way to stabilize it, and he creates what? He creates Standard Oil. And so what he's saying to all his customers across the country is, because that's who he wants to provide, everyone in the country, the kerosene from my company is standard. It's going to be the same every time. You see what I'm saying? So that's his brand. His brand is, it will be the same. You can rely on my brand. And so he's able to do that and follow through with it. He is giving them that product. And as he gets more and more buyers, he's got enough money to buy out other companies, doesn't he? And so he starts buying out all of these other companies. And as he's getting more and more wealthy, because he's taking all of their customers, it's like a hostile takeover is what he's doing of these other companies. And now he's creating a what?
Monopoly.
Exactly. And because he's created the monopoly, does he really need Vanderbilt anymore? No, he does not need Vanderbilt anymore. So this exclusive deal that he's got, he's just going to throw that out the window. And what can Vanderbilt do? What can he do? Because now, yeah, trains are starting to, it's been overbuilt. People are using other sources, other forms of transportation are coming up. And he knows it. And so now Vanderbilt has to make a move. He has to make a move. And the move that he's going to make is he is going to ally himself with his competitors. All right? So if the competitors get together, there's two of them. There's Vanderbilt and there's Tom Scott is the other big name. And if they get together, they can demand that Rockefeller give them a lower price to transport, right? So now they can control the pricing. That's what they're thinking. So they get together and they want to do that, but does Rockefeller, does he lay down and play dead? No. All right, so he's being strong-armed by a coalition of railroad tycoons, all right? They've got him backed in a corner, and so he's got to start thinking
Outside box.
Yep.
and oh my gosh, he comes up with something absolutely brilliant. Do you know what he did?
Working on his own railroad?
He is going to eliminate the trains altogether. And do you know how he's going to do that?
Pipeline.
Excellent. Excellent. He's in his refinery. And he's saying, well, the oil is traveling just fine in pipes in the refinery. Who would think like this? So if I laid pipes across the country, then I would be able to why wouldn't I be able to send my oil just across the country in pipes that I've laid? Who would think like that? That's like a huge risk. We thought Vanderbilt was a high roller. This is a huge risk. Like, he does not know that this is going to work, does he? But he's laid all these pipes. It's so incredible. It's so amazing that he thought of that. And we still do it today, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do it today. And this is from Revenge. The Revenge of J.D. Rockefeller is why we have that. So here's the first one, and now look at us. Right? All right, so now this guy, has he exceeded Vanderbilt?
Yep.
And everybody, right? He's exceeded everybody. So how is he seen in the public?
Well, not very nice.
Not nice at all. He's seen as an absolute villain, just a monster, and he's not going to allow any smaller businesses to compete with him. And so he's just this really, really, really bad guy. And so now the government's going to get involved, and he's brought to court. Do you remember that he was brought to court?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was brought to court, and under the Sherman Antitrust Act, and what he was asked to do was to split up, what he was ordered to do was to split up Standard Oil, right? Now, you might recognize some of these,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they were trying to take him down, right?
Yeah.
After the split up and the division of Standard Oil, he became richer than ever. Richer than ever, because now he's got all of these companies. All right, so it did not take the man down. All right, so let's talk about the public perception and the actual reality. Remember Eliza? And remember the things that she instilled in her sons?
Charity.
Charity, yes. He worked with the Underground Railroad. All right, that's not something that people typically know. And did you know that because he loved his wife, Laura, and he respected her. He said that she had a great business mind, and he listened to her, and she was his advisor. And in honor of her, he established Spelman College. Did you know that was Rockefeller?
No.
No. You might not know this either. Look at this.
Wow.
Pretty stunning, right?
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. Okay, so really throughout his life, all his life, not just at the end of his life, but all of his life, he had always been donating and doing things. Just people just didn't know it. The general public did not know it about it. Okay, so now we've got new money is going to transition into what? Because we've got generations of Vanderbilts, right?
Yeah.
And we have generations of Rockefellers, right? So let's see how they did. Want to see how they did? How did they transition from new money to old money? Well, let's first take a look at the Vanderbilts. These are the Vanderbilts, okay? And so they had this vast amount of money, and their lifestyle was what they did for a living. All right, so this wealthy lifestyle is their job. That's what they do all day.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're just going to spend the money. They're going to go on vacations. They're going to buy stuff. They're going to live their life, and they're really not putting anything back in. Right? The Vanderbilt public perception goes downhill, doesn't it? Do you remember this court case?
Yes.
Yes. So you remember Gloria Vanderbilt? And her aunt, Gloria Vanderbilt's aunt, did not think that her mother was capable of raising her, and so she took the mother to court for custody of little Gloria, and the aunt won. Now, Gloria then, without any real family money left by the time her generation rolled around, do you remember what she did? Fashion, exactly. Yeah, she had to make her own way, didn't she? She had to make her own way, and she did, and she was successful in her own right without any of the Vanderbilt legacy money. And what about her children? Those are her two children. Yeah, yeah. Those are her two children, and do you know that by the time this generation arrives, there is absolutely nothing left? There's nothing left. All right? Anderson Cooper does not have a trust fund. There is no money.
I don't think he needs one. Yeah.
You think he's doing all right over there at CNN?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, well, now what about the Rockefellers? What about them? How do you think they are doing?
They did very well.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they absolutely did. Because what they did was they, right from the start, behaved like old money people. Okay? So they are, first of all, they're out of the spotlight. All right? They're not trying to be extravagant. They're going to be modest. And they did very smart, wise investments so that they were able to live on those investments. And they also went into public service. They went into public service. The other thing that they did was they had these very strategic marriages, all right? And those marriages were designed to get them into things like, politics. And we know that that worked, right? Because we know that Nelson Rockefeller was what? Exactly, okay, so that worked. So they kept private, they kept to themselves. They didn't live in extravagant or outwardly, they had wealth, but they weren't flaunting it, all right? They didn't have any public scandals and that kind of thing. They were humble, they were giving to charity so that they were well respected
Until he died.
Well, but even before that, there was a public, not a scandal, but do you remember this story? Do you remember
He
this?
got lost in the
Yes.
jungles in so
No,
Pacific.
New Guinea.
Yeah.
Yes, this is Michael Rockefeller. He's the son of Nelson Rockefeller. And he is not going into politics or law or banking like the family would. He wants to be an anthropologist. And he loves art, and especially primitive art. And so he goes to New Guinea, to this tribe, because the anthropologist in him wants to go, but also they were creating this very specific what's called primitive art. And so he wanted to go and he wanted to research that. And so he did. And he loved it. And he went a couple of times. And then there was an incident where his boat had overturned, and it's something that he should have survived. He should have just swam to shore, and he should have survived. But no one could find him. He came up missing. He came up missing. And now this tribe in New Guinea that he was studying, that he was researching and spending time with, were known to be cannibals. So the rumors were going around that they ate him because and the reason for that is because his family's wealth, that they sent out the most extravagant search party humanly possible, that the search for him was as thorough as humanly possible, and yet he was never found, and there was no information. We still to this day don't know what happened to Michael Rockefeller, which is just sad. It's just like a sad situation. And so that's why people do this kind of default on the cannibal thing. But the family says that they feel very certain that he drowned, and that's what happened. I would prefer to think that too. Yes. But, other than this, the family continues to do well. They're making sure that they've got investments and that they're replenishing what they take out, and they continue to do charitable works. Okay? This one here, she's in fashion. All right? That is another deviation from the normal banking, politics, law track that they go on to. Okay, so we've got one new money family that blew it, right? They have nothing left. And then we've got another new money family that did really well. They were smart about it. All right, that came out of the Gilded Age. But what about old money families from the Gilded Age? Old money families from the Gilded Age. We're going to find out about one of those old money families next week. And I'm pretty sure I have a lot of surprises for you. Okay. Okay, so next week we're going to take a look at, we briefly mentioned them, but next week we're going to take a deep dive into the Astor family. Okay, everybody, thank you for coming. I'll see you then.